Well, good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Had a good week, or have you had a good last week? This morning it's interesting. I just want to talk about. I've been reading through Genesis in preparation, really, for next week, but also just working my way through, and I came to the story about Sodom and Gomorrah, which is an interesting story for anybody who knows the Bible. Genesis is the first book there, and as one of the kids' songs used to go, Genesis means beginning, and if it were anywhere else in the Bible, it'd just be silly, because it's beginning. So Genesis is the first book. So I'm going to read just a little verse, but I'll put it in context. You've got this guy called Lot, who moves into a city, and then God said, I'm going to destroy the city and the surrounding cities because I've had enough of them. And he sends two angels in there, and these angels literally tell him to get out of here and run. And in Genesis 19 verse 16 it says this, the angels literally said run, and it says, while he lingered, the men took hold of his hand, his wife's hand, and the hands of his daughters, and the Lord, being merciful to him, they brought him outside and set him outside the city. That's the New King James Version. The New International Version says, when he hesitated, the men grabbed him with his hands and his wife's hand and his daughters and led them out safely outside the city, and the Lord was merciful for them. And it got me thinking, if this morning an alarm went on your phone and says some fanatical group or some political group has hidden a nuclear bomb in Halifax and it's got a 10-mile explosion, leave. Would you go, I think I'll just nip out shopping. I need to nip back home. Len, would he rush through Halifax to get to his house to get... Would you do these things if they said you've got 5 minutes to get out of this 10-mile radius? Or would you just linger? Would you hesitate? And that's the scene by lots in them. It's this word that he hesitated that really got me thinking. In the Bible, the word hesitate means to pause before doing or saying something, often because of uncertainty or nervous about the action. To linger is to take a long time to leave. Sometimes to hesitate to leave, to linger, is not a positive thing. I've seen many people lose out on something because they hesitated. There's you need to look before you leap, but those who hesitate miss. It's kind of an interesting thing. In the Bible, the word is primarily used to convey a delaying of action or an hesitation, often used in context where there's a pause or reluctance to act on something because of fear and uncertainty. The term can imply a physical delay or even to delay in one's emotions to act about something. So the word being, or the hesitation, the word there, is to stop or to pause when one shouldn't. I don't know why I say when one shouldn't. That's quite proper English, isn't it? When he shouldn't, Yorkshire. How's that one? So Lot hesitated. When we look at Lot, there's not much mention in the Bible about him, but he hesitated on the day of trouble. Trouble was coming, he'd been told it's coming, and yet he hesitated. And it's fascinating that you think he's stupid to do that. How many of us hesitate or linger in a situation when we know we shouldn't stay in that situation any longer? You see, the Bible's, I've been talking recently about we're in this world, and the world, not the people, but the systems of the world are against us, or at least against God, and we're with God, and therefore they're against God, against us. The devil's out to get us, and we've got our own self in there, our own self, the ugly one that's in there, tries to come up and encourage us to do things we shouldn't do. And we're in this battle, as the song went, there's another in the fire, meaning Jesus is always with us in the storms and in the fires of life. And yet sometimes when we're told to get out of somewhere or get out of a situation, we hesitate. Instead of running for our lives, we hang around only to make the situation or put up with the situation longer than what we should. The question is, how did he end up in Sodom? Because even in his day, Sodom was known as a wicked city. So you got this man who's hanging around with Abraham, and you go back to chapter 14, he's hanging around with Abraham, he's wandering around, he gets into a situation where he eventually ends up in Sodom. And in our lives, in our situations, you see, you may not make a big decision that leads to a big problem. Majority of big problems, when you back up a little bit, you find a little decision that develops into a big problem. Now, to demonstrate this, we've got a video we're just going to put up, and this is just to demonstrate how a little decision can lead to a bigger problem. Thank you, Malcolm. So, a little decision can sometimes lead to bigger problems. Now, don't fear about all your little decisions, but some decisions need to be made wisely, and they need to be taken into consideration, because Lot ended up in Sodom, because in chapter 13 of Genesis we read this, that Adam said to Lot, let's not have any quarrel between me and you, between our herdsmen and mine, for we are close relatives. So Lot was Abraham's nephew, and Lot had become very wealthy, and so had Abraham, and they had too many flocks and sheep and goats and cattle and gold, and everything were piling up, and the herdsmen were starting to argue over water and land, and Abraham said, we're not going to do this. So he says, isn't the whole land before us? Let us part company. If you go to the left, I will go to the right. If you go to the right, I will go to the left. And look, this is a problem now. This is a little decision. He said, Lot looked around and saw that the whole plain of the Jordan towards Zoar was well watered like the garden of the Lord, like Egypt. This was before he destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of the Jordan and set out towards the east. Now he knew those cities were there because they'd wandered around the land for a long time. They knew these evil cities were there, but they were based on a plain of really well-watered land. Now Abraham had kept away from them, but Lot made that little choice because at the end of the day he wanted to feed his sheep and his lambs and his goats and his cattle, and he thought if we go there. So Lot's, in a sense, very wealthy. He's got all these guys working for him, looking after his sheep. And we need to put his point, he's very wealthy. And he goes down into the land, into this plain, because it's there. And it said the two men parted company. Abraham lived in the land of Canaan, which is today's Israel. And Lot lived among the cities of the plain. So he's now gone down from looking, good idea, I'll go down there. Now he's living amongst the cities on the plain. It's just progressed a little step. Because at the end of the day, if you want to make some decent money and carry on being wealthy, you need to engage with these people. And then he said he pitched his tent towards Sodom. He pitched his doorway in view of Sodom. So every day he got up, he could see the city. When he went to bed at night, he could see the city. He'd made a decision to go down there. Now he lived amongst them. Now his view was towards the city. In chapter 14, we find out that he's actually living now in the city. So he's moved off the plain, out of his tent, and he's now in a house, and he's living in the city. Chapter 19, it says Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. So he's gone from just being somebody who's living in the city to somebody who's got authority, who's an official in the city. You can see how he's progressed. And he looks good. He's done well for himself. He was rich with Abraham. Now he's living in the city. His wife and his kids are there with him. He's enjoying life. But he knew that it were an evil city. He knew what they got up to was awful. And he said he made what looked like wise and good decisions, but he knew that the people of Sodom were wicked. He joined himself with people that were really against God. Yet in wisdom, it looked good. But you need to read where he ended up. Because he ended up living in a cave with his two daughters with nothing. That's the end of the story, I'll give you that up front. So, often Sodom is used as a warning throughout the Bible. Whenever you read the word Sodom or the city of Sodom from this point onwards in the Bible, it's never done in a good light. It's never said, Sodom was a great city. It's a representative of evil. And that's an interesting thing. Now, people might say, well, Lot was probably, was Lot a believer? Was he an evil man? Did it matter? Actually, Lot was a believer. In today's things, it'd be like he was a Christian. In those days, he was just a believer, a righteous man, it's called. Peter tells us this. Peter was one of Jesus' best mates, and he says this, for if God did not spare the angels when they sinned, this is before Adam and Eve, but sent them to Tartarus, which is the lowest part of war, and put them into chains of darkness, or another version, gloomy dungeons, and held them for judgment, if he did not spare the ancient cities of this world and the ancient world, when he brought the flood on the ungodly people. That's the Noah story, but protected Noah, a preacher of righteousness, and 7 others. If he condemned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah by burning them to ash and made them an example what was going to happen to the ungodly. So Sodom is an example what's going to happen to the ungodly. And if he had rescued Lot, a righteous man, so Lot was a righteous person. Remember, a righteous person is a believer. Doesn't mean he's perfect, but he believed in God. Who, this is the interesting one, who was distressed by the depravity and the conduct of lawlessness, for that righteous man living amongst them day after day was tormented in his righteous soul by the lawless deeds he saw and heard. If this is so, then the Lord knows how to rescue godly people from trials and hold the unrighteous for punishment on the day of judgment. This is especially true for those who follow the corrupt desires of the flesh and despise authority. So God knows how to rescue people from dark places. God knows how to, but Lot was tormented in his heart. When he looked around, does the world that we live in bother you?
Yeah.
Does it concern you? Or are you comfortable living, in this terminology, living in the city of Sodom? Are you comfortable there? Or does it bother you? Because if it doesn't bother you, you're not seeing the world through God's eyes. And it's not that God wants to bring judgment upon the world. That will happen at some point. But at the moment, God loves people, he cares for people, and he wants people to leave this place, we'll call it Sodom, but it could be other places in today's language. He wants them to come out of darkness into light. He wants them to come out of the place of death into the place of life. And he wants us to be part of that. Now, many people often say to me, well, Johnny, God destroyed Sodom, and there's groups that even say this today. If I said to you, why did God destroy Sodom? You probably may say, some of you may say, that it was because of the homosexuality that was operating in that city. And yes, there was homosexuality in that city, because if you read the story, these two angels were talking to Abraham, and Abraham's debating with them about whether they should destroy the city. And Abraham reasoned with God and said, if there's 10 righteous people in the city, will you destroy it? And God said, no, I won't. And these two angels went down to the city to rescue Lot. And the guys, it says, the guys in the town, in the city, came to him. And in the King James Version, it says, they came to get to know him, or at least, he said, bring them out that we may know them. The NIV puts it a bit different. Bring them out that we may have sex with them. So a lot of the men of the city came to Lot's house when these angels turned up to rescue him and said, bring them out, we want to rape them. That's an interesting one. So that was going on, but that's not the reason why God destroyed that city. The reason he destroyed that city, now listen to it when it compares with the UK right now. Ezekiel 16, 49 and 50, it says, Sodom's sin was pride, gluttony and laziness. Sodom's sin was pride, gluttony, laziness. While the poor and the needy suffered outside the doors, she, this is talking about the city, was proud and committed detestable sins, so that I wiped her out, as you have seen. Now, the detestable sins, people say, yes, that's homosexuality. No, it was the fact that they condoned the sin that the people were committing. Because they actually thumbed up and says, what these people are up to is okay. What sort of world are we living in? Exactly the same. Now, God's wrath was put on Jesus on the cross. So he's not going to blast cities. But there is a day coming, and this is what Sodom actually stands for, a day coming when he will rescue the righteous people out of this world, leaving the unrighteous people behind. And that's when they go into what is called the tribulation, then the great tribulation, which is when it's the anger of God comes upon the earth, but the children of God have been taken out of here. But in that context, it says that Lot hesitated. He hesitated. Why would you hesitate? Why would you hesitate in a similar situation? Yet we do. We live in towns and cities. We mingle with people. Now, like I said before, I have no problem going to certain places and talking to people like God. It doesn't bother me. But there are other places I would not go. So I could go to a drug den, sit with them, talk to them about God, talk to them about, until they get too high and then it's pointless. But I can talk to them because that's never bothered me. But there are other areas do bother me, so I stay away from them. How many of us are mixing with stuff that we shouldn't mix with? It's bringing torment of heart and soul. And it may not be a literal place. It could be people we hang around with. It could be circumstances we find ourselves in. Guys, if you're deliberately going into places, and I don't mean deliberate sin, don't hear me right on this, but if you're going anywhere that brings torture of your soul, whether that's physical, spiritual, emotional, you need to consider why you're there. Now, don't think, it's a worse situation. I visit some people, usually family members, And I only stay a short time because they just suck the will to live out of me. I don't want to be around them. They vex my soul. That's an old English word, isn't it? They vex. They cause me, because I don't want to be around them. But God did not destroy the city because of what people often name. He destroyed the city because of their pride and because they would not help the poor, and then they condoned other people's sins. So he lived in this city for years. Now some people might say, well, he hesitated because he cared for the people. He was out there caring for people. The reason why Abraham asked for the angels not to destroy the city, there were 10 people in there, because Abraham reasoned in his mind that there'd be Lot, and we know he had 2 daughters, but many people think he had 4 daughters, and that 2 of them were married off and 2 of them were engaged, and there's a whole thing to get into that, so I won't. But Abraham reasoned that there were at least 10 people in that city that Lot would have reached out to and helped them become believers. That's why he stopped at 10 for. He'd gone from 50 down to 10 because he thought at least there's going to be Lot, his wife, his kids, their husbands, and Lot's going to have done such a great job of witnessing that many people's got saved, so God won't destroy it. And yet the Bible says that there only one person. So did Lot care for the people? Well, he did in a fashion, but all that time he lived in that city, he reached none of his colleagues, none of his friends, none of his neighbours, and none of his family. He lived there for years and nobody got saved. He lived there for years in Sodom, being tormented by the sin, and never got saved. Nobody got saved. That's a bit scary thought, isn't it? And he put up with it. So he was the only one, his wife and his kids, and we'll get to his wife next time we speak. So he hesitated maybe because he loved the families, and yet there was nothing, no fruit in his life, because he looked exactly like everybody else. But it gets even worse, because when he went and knocked on the doors of his son-in-laws and said, God's going to destroy this city, get out of here, come on, let's move, pack your bags, let's go. His son-in-laws thought he were having a laugh. Because he was just like everybody else. You're crazy. They thought he was laughing. They thought he was having a joke with them. 2 angels had just turned up and blinded a load of people, and his son-in-laws think he's having a laugh. Because he fit in so nicely with everybody else. Question, do you hesitate about speaking about God? Do you hesitate about living a godly life? Are you just the same as everybody else? Jesus prayed this. Jesus said this, my prayer is not, talking about us, is not that you take them out of the world, but that you protect them from the evil one. They are not of this world, even as I am not of this world. God says, I'm not going to take you out of the world, but I'm going to pray protection over you in the world. And if you've got the protection of God over you, when God says move, you move, and He's going to protect you, but if you don't move, His protection moves. Often we make a decision which is small and almost insignificant, but we're stepping outside of God's plan and God's blessings and God's umbrella of protection, and it leads us into a course of actions where we could never have dreamed or imagined. Think of your own situations, your own problems, even ones that you're going through now. Maybe you're in a situation that you can back up and go, hang on a minute, it's because of this. Something silly. It could be. Most people get lost walking, I love walking, but most people get lost walking, especially if it gets a bit misty because they're unprepared, or they don't know how to use a map or compass, or the phone's not working. But usually it's because they take a slight detour and a slight little correction, and it's not a correction, it just gets worse and worse and worse, and people can walk off the ends of cliffs because they don't know what's going on around them. You need to be very aware. The problem is that when God says to move, it's time to move. Has anybody ever watched or read more the Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe? Most people's watched it, but the book's got this little scene in it, so's the film, but the book unpacks it a bit more, where the 4 kids go to Mr. and Mrs. Beaver's house, and they're telling them the story, the prophecies and sayings, and then Edmund sneaks out and runs, and the other kids realise he's gone and he's gone to the witch. And this is the scene where they say, we need to go now. And Daddy Beaver's going, we're going and we're going now. And he stamps his foot and says, get out there now. And what does his wife do? She goes, I'll make a flask of tea. I'll make some sandwiches. And Dad's going, let's get out. The wolves are going to come. We need to run and we need to run. And she's going, yes, but we need some food for the way. And she even says in the book, she goes, I need to get my sewing machine. Because she loved her sewing machine. Sometimes when God says move, he says move, but you're going, but I need this and this. God's going, go and go now, and you're going, yeah, but. We need to move, we shouldn't hesitate. And it's a phrase that he hesitated that really resonated. It started getting me kind of almost worked up because I think there's many Christians where God's challenging them to move and challenging them to grow and challenging them to step forward, but they're hesitating because they're looking back at what they've got. You see, I said this earlier that Lot ended up in a cave. He went from having everything, making decisions to get more, to leaving a city and ended up living in a cave. These angels said to him, go and go now, because we cannot destroy this city until you leave. And he hesitated. They even said to him, run to the mountains, and he says, can't I run to that town down the road because it's a little bit closer? It's like people from Halifax when they're going to blow Halifax up, going, can we just run to Sober Bridge? Run, he says, we'll protect, God will not destroy that town, then that's okay, you go. But even when he got to that town and rested a bit, he said, forget this, I'm out of here. And he ran to the mountains, ended up with nothing. God didn't want him to end up with nothing, but he didn't want him in the city. But it started because his eyes wandered. He looked down and thought, that looks good. Then he moved amongst the cities. He were hanging around among the cities. Then he pitched his tent towards the city. They were watching them. Then he moves into the city. Then he becomes somebody in the city. And then God said, I'm going to destroy the city. And he still hangs around. And in our day and in our world, we shouldn't hesitate when God starts stirring us up. The Bible says this is Matthew 16. It says, for what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world but loses his soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? What is it if you get everything? Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't have stuff, we have stuff, but realistically, what does it profit a man if he gains everything but loses his soul? You see, some of the problems that you're in because of your decision. The world's having a go at me, the devil's having a go at me. Probably not. Majority of us are in problems because of the decisions we've made, so make wise decisions. How do you make wise decisions? You take it to God. It's only a little decision. A little decision can become a big problem. But we hang on to it too long. 1 Timothy, Paul wrote this. After all, we brought nothing into this world and we can take nothing out of this world. You can't take it with you. The only thing you can take with you are the people that you've reached to, that you've blessed, that you've encouraged, that you've taught about Jesus. We're not quite sure why he hesitated. There could be loads of reasons, and I've got a list of them. I could have gone for every one of them, but we don't know why he lingered around. We don't really know. We might unpack this in a couple of weeks. But we know that he hesitated, he lingered. He was drawn back. And the angels got to a point where they didn't muck around. They literally grabbed him. It said they took him by the hand. That's nice English. In the Hebrew language, it says they literally grabbed him. They'd have left a mark on his wrist, and he'd have had to get a letter and get the police involved because he had a little bruise on his hand. No, they literally grabbed him and dragged him out by force. And his wife and his 2 daughters. We don't know whether the rest of them were destroyed. But he lingered. So my question is to you this morning, is God calling you closer to him? And are you lingering? Are you hesitating? Because you know that as you step closer to God, that you may have to lay aside certain things. You may have to give certain things up. And like I've often said, for many of you, it's not giving up sin and giving up bad things. Sometimes you've got to give up what seems good. Sometimes it's about laying things. We were talking earlier, me and some ladies, at the walk I'm going to be doing next year, and trying to describe that when you do a 16-day, 15-day walk, you've got to carry your clothes. But there's only so many pairs of underpants you can carry. So you've got to wash them. There's only so many socks you want to carry. So I often carry a bar of soap, spare underclothes, but t-shirts, undies, socks, and I wash them and dry them as I'm walking, if radiators are, if we don't have the drying room. Because when you're travelling, you go light, is what I'm saying. When you're travelling, you don't try and pick up everything around you. Some of us are suffering heartache and we're distressed on the inside because we're carrying things we were never designed to carry. You're carrying other people's problems instead of going, you know what? Why should I? Now, I'm really good at this. I can engage with people with their problems and circumstances, and I can pray with them and I can talk it through with them. But do you know when I leave? I forget about it. Because it's not my problem. I've got my own problems to carry. And that includes people who are very close to me. Why should I carry everybody else's problems? It's not my problem to carry their problems. In fact, if you really want to be spiritual, you hand it over to Jesus and let him carry it. But the problem is we don't want him to carry it because we like carrying it. Because when you're carrying problems, it makes you, oh, I'm carrying problems. I'm carrying, oh, my life at minute. Oh, woe is me. Get your problems, pick them up, chuck them on Jesus, because he says this, my burden is easy and my yoke is light. So if you're feeling under pressure, guess what? You're carrying something you should never be carrying. You see, I fact this is just an observation, guys, and I'm not going to point fingers because I'll point at myself. But guys tend to be quite simple. Problem, solve it, don't solve it. If I can't solve it, it's not my problem. But some women like everybody's problems. Take them on, take them on, take them on, take them on, take them on. And like, something happens, they want to take on a problem, take them on. Now, I'm generalising here, I'm really sorry. It's just an observation. Now, some people like Jean and Ian, they don't take anybody's problems on. They'll pray for you, am I right? They'll encourage you. But they're not going to like me, taking problems on. They're wised up. So in Sodom, Lot carried the weight of the city's sin and the city's problems. And he tried to carry him and he hesitated because he loved the people maybe. Or maybe he just loved the sin, who knows. But he picked up too much and they said, leave it. We'll find out next time that Lot's wife longed for the city for the good stuff. She wanted that stuff and that wasn't right neither. But when God is calling you closer to him, we need to lay some stuff down. And the one thing God wants us to lay down is people's problems that are not our problems. And if they're your problems, give them to him. Because I cannot give your problems to Jesus. You've got to give your problems to Jesus. I can only give my problems to Jesus. So you trying to give your problem to me is no good. Because I'm going to carry it, you're going to carry it. Joe and I once went down somebody's house years ago. May were in the middle. Have you ever walked in somebody's house and the atmosphere is a bit dodgy? They're having an argument, but try not to while you're there. But then they just erupted and they're having this argument and we're sat there feeling awkward, drinking us tea. Let's get out of here. That wasn't really a problem. The problem was when we got home, and I'll say it was me, because probably it was, but I went, you know, he had a point. And Joe went, well, actually, I think she had a point. And I went, no, he had a point. And Joe went, no, she had the point. I think he was right, she said. She was right. And before you know it, we're having an argument about their argument, but we're not to do with us. And then we woke up and what are we doing? But that's what it's like carrying other people's problems. Lot was trying to carry people's problems, but maybe we're just trying to carry stuff out with him. And I'm trying to bring it into apply to our lives. Don't hesitate. Don't hesitate in dropping problems. Now, there is stuff. I mean, you know, kids are not a problem. They might be hard work, but they're not a problem. Because if you drop her, you can get done for dropping your kid. But You don't drop. I'm not saying get rid of stuff, but you don't need to carry stuff. Only carry what you need to. Don't be burdened down by not just your situations, your circumstances, but don't pick up everybody else's. Learn to be wise. Make good choices, not ones that's going to lead to problems, but ones that's going to lead to liberation, freedom. Try this one. No. No. Just say no. Except for when you're on tea and coffee rota, because I will not accept no on that one. You're on the list, that's it. But try saying no sometimes. No to people, but no to the devil. And no to yourself. No, I am not going to pick up that problem. I'm not going to carry that burden. I'm going to pray with them, but I'm not going to carry it. Say no to yourself. Just say no, I've had enough. Don't say I've had enough and do naught about it. No, I've had enough. I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to hand it over to Jesus. I'm going to pray about it and then hand it over. But many people like to pray about it and then whine about it and then talk about it and then whine about it and then maybe pray a bit more instead of going, you know what, I'm going to pray about this, I'm going to give it to Jesus and I'm not going to hesitate and I'm not going to carry it anymore. Jesus says this, cast all your anxieties, your worries on me. And people have to go, oh, you shouldn't worry. I get that. But do you know what? If I find myself starting to get into a place of worry or concern, do you know what triggers in me? Time to pray. I don't debate whether I should or shouldn't worry, but every time I start drifting towards worry, I go, oh, it's time to pray. So then I pray, casting it, which means to throw, not a girly throw, but a proper throw, onto Jesus. Sorry, ladies. Some girls probably could throw better than I can. But cast it, throw it, chuck it onto Jesus, and then when you've given him it, leave it. I remind Jesus often, you know that problem that I had that I gave to you, which is now your problem, I've not seen you do all about it yet. You know, I'm not as blunt as that, but I have to say, I thank him for taking it, and I thank him that he's going to sort it out for me. So, is God drawing you closer to him? Are you lingering? Are you hesitating? Or are you running into it? It's a good question. That's a house group question, isn't it? Are you lingering in the things of God? You can put that one down. Are you lingering from leaving trouble? Are you lingering, hesitating to step out in faith? There's lots of things you could put on there, isn't there? So Lot eventually, the Bible's quite, you can tell the Bible's written by God because there's so much in it that man wouldn't have put in. Lot eventually runs off to Zob and he runs off into Moab with his two daughters. His daughters went, there's no men round here. I know, we'll get his dad drunk. So they got him drunk, they had sex with the dad, he was drunk, they had sex, they got pregnant, and they had two boys, and those two boys became the father of two nations, and these two nations were at war with Israel. So the decision to go, that plain looks really nice, well watered, and good economically, I'll go there, led to him losing his wife, his son-in-laws, his entire wealth. He lived in a cave. And it brought about two groups of people that became enemies of Israel, Abraham's descendants. So did it work out all right? No, but in the middle of it, he hesitated. So don't be an hesitator. I must put a little bracket thing in here. You don't have to be a person that rushes into stuff. I'm not saying that. Act wisely. But when you know what you know that you should do, once you know what you should do, don't hesitate. Once you know it's time to go, hit the road, and leg it. I don't think he left that city running too fast. But I reckon when the destruction started coming, he were off like, you know, he were going, woohoo! And the story from walking, I walked through a field of cows in the rain, and they were all watching me, and the path went right the way through the middle of, and I'm not stupid, I'll take a little detour around the edge. So I did, and they're all watching me, and I'm walking. Now they maybe thought I was a farmer, but I don't know that. They all started following me. So I sped up. I've got a big rucksack and I've done probably 17 miles at this point, so I'm not really energetic, but they followed me, so I picked up the pace. They picked up the pace. Have you ever seen the cow start to run? They were running. I were out there. And I'm running, and there's a sty, and there's a gate, and I hit that gate, and I flew over it. Rucksack flew over, I thought I landed on, and all the cows were just running after me. Once I noticed there were a problem, I were off. I think when Lot realised that his problem was really, destruction was really coming, I bet he set off like a rocket. But in our lives, it's the same. Sometimes we linger, we hesitate, but then we realise we need to move now, and sometimes you need to get faster at moving. Don't go stopping for your sandwiches, and the flask of tea, and the sewing machine or whatever might be important, but run if you have to. So what's the lesson for us? Don't hesitate. When God's drawing you close to Him, don't hesitate from that. When God's leading you out of situations, don't hesitate. In fact, when you know God's leading you into some situations, I just like to get it over and done with. Let's go into this. So I hope that's been a blessing to you. If you have any questions, ask the people that brought you, or me, or house groups, whatever. You know, so we'll unpack these at the house group. So I hope that's been a blessing to you. If you do want to read the story of Lot, it's Genesis 13 onwards to 20. It's an interesting read. It'll give you a little bit of background, and you can see the story there. So I hope that's been encouraging for you. Let me pray. Heavenly Father, I thank you for your awesomeness, your greatness, for your love for us. Lord Jesus, I thank you that you died on a cross, that you were buried, that you rose again on the third day so that we could believe and trust in you and have life and freedom in you. Lord, help us not to linger, not to hesitate in the good things that you've got for us, but help us, Lord, to trust you at all times. Amen. Lord God, I thank you for what you're doing in our lives, and I pray that this message will settle into our hearts and produce good seed, good questions, as we, Lord, just seek you daily. Amen.